everybody. Thank you so much for joining this podcast today. I am so excited. You guys are going to love our guest, Cassandra Harvey. But before I officially introduce you, I just want to read a few things about Cassandra. Her voice has reached an audience of over 500,000 people. She has been awarded Victim Services Award of Distinction, presented by the Ministry of the Attorney General in recognition of her contributions to supporting victims and advancing advocacy efforts within the community. She has also contributed to policy and legislative advocacy related to Bill 41, supporting initiatives aimed at improving coordinated responses and data-informed approaches in addressing human trafficking. She has been with a law firm in Toronto, working as a victim's advocate and working towards her law degree. So she is just absolutely incredible. She's a mother of two children, and she also has quite a story as she has experienced human trafficking. So thank you so much, Cassandra, and I officially welcome you and thank you for being here. You have such a powerful, inspiring story that I believe every Canadian and everybody in the globe should know. But what, yes, tell us a little bit about who you are and the work you currently do.
Yeah, you gave a great rundown of who I am. So I experienced sex trafficking. I started being groomed when I was just 14 years old, and I was later trafficked roughly when I was 19 or 20 for about 4 years. The work I do now, so I'm kind of all over the place. I do a lot of advocacy for just like policy reform with respect to human trafficking. I helped develop the provincial human trafficking plan, the strategy for the next 5 years for human trafficking. And I currently work at Diamond and Diamond as a victims advocate. So what that entails is I do a lot of social media content to just raise awareness. A lot of youth who are trafficked are often trafficked through social media. So I try to get in there and provide as much information on the web as possible. And then I work in the firm to just raise awareness. I work with the sexual assault team as well. So sometimes if we have a survivor or someone who's inquiring about what their legal options are, I work with our sexual assault team. I sit in on consultations to see what we can do and how we can help. And I'm more of like a supportive role for a lot of survivors because we know that, abuse in itself is very traumatic, but then also going through the legal process, whether that's criminal or civil, it's also a very, very traumatic experience. So I'm kind of just there to raise awareness and to support survivors because I've been through similar things. And then the goal is to ultimately become a lawyer myself.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. Like you are such an inspiration to so many people.
Thank you.
Do you have a faith?
I do. So I'm Christian. It took a really long time to get here. Yeah, so I guess I'll go into a little bit more about my faith journey and how I came to find faith in Christianity. So I grew up in foster care, and my biological family, I would say like my grandparents were very, very religious. They were Christian. They were very, very involved, I think, like just in the faith itself. And then I went into foster care. And sometimes what happens when children go into foster care is they really lose that religion and the identity portion of who they are and how their biological, what types of values their biological family resonates with. And so when I went into foster care, no one really knew because I am from a mixed heritage. So my mom, she is Asian and Portuguese, and then my father is Black and Puerto Rican. And so no one really knew kind of like what my history was or, what faith I believed in. And I was so young, I didn't know either. So if I was asked, I was just like, I don't know, I'm kind of just living. Like, this is just my life. And so when I went into foster care, no, any of the homes that I were in, they never had a faith. So I was always told that I was either an atheist or like, like there is a God, but we're not going to practice a faith and we're not actively involved in a religious community. And so throughout my teens, I was predominantly involved. So a lot of my friends were Muslim. I grew up in like marginalized communities, and most of my friends were also Muslim as well. And so what kind of happened is I started to learn more about Islam. And so my friends would teach me, I would go to school and I would learn about it. And ultimately, at the time, I had become Muslim. So my children, with their father, he was Muslim, and so I converted to Islam. And now looking back, I don't know, that wasn't the right choice for me. And it's not that it wasn't the right choice because I don't believe in the religion necessarily. It was more like I felt like I was doing it for others and not for me. So it was something that I didn't resonate with myself. I didn't feel at home. I knew there was a God, but I didn't really know, how to go about it. And so when I moved to Toronto, when I was relocated, from Ottawa due to being trafficked, I started becoming involved with just by chance, like a Christian organization called Safe Families. And Safe Families, they help women or families who need help with their children who don't necessarily have a support system. It's a Christian-based organization. And so I met a few Christian families from that organization who have, to this day, I consider my family. And it was really interesting because they would start inviting me to church and to learning about Jesus and praying and all of these things. And every time I would go to church, I would make the joke that I was going to be lit on fire if I stepped into the church because I wasn't Christian at the time. And everyone was so happy and so welcoming, and the community, it always made me so emotional inside. It was like when I would step in, like it was like I felt so much joy, and I would always cry. Every time I went to church, I would cry. And after a while, I started to get overwhelmed by all of those feelings because I was like, I've never felt that way before about, something that everyone says exists, but we've never seen. So to me, it was like, there's a God, but what about like, why are people going through hardship? And why did all of this happen to me if there's a God? And so I also used to think that everyone in the church community was scary because everyone would be like, "Oh, welcome to church. Hi." It was so welcoming. And I had never had that before, right? I grew up in foster care. All I really knew was trauma and hardship. And so slowly I started getting involved in the church community. I started going to church on Sundays. I started going to Bible study. I started learning a lot about Christianity. I took a religion course. And slowly I realized that this is a faith that resonates with me. And this is something that I want my children to grow up in. These are the values and the morals that I want us to have as a family. And I thank God every day for everything that I had been through, even the hardship, because I think all of it had led me to A, what the work I'm doing now, and B, finding Christianity and being, a Jesus follower at the end of the day.
That is incredible. Would you like to share with us a little bit about when you started becoming trafficked?
Yeah, so I think I'll go back to kind of the beginning and how I was vulnerable to be
Yeah.
trafficked in the first place. So, like I mentioned, I grew up in foster care. Most of my biological family, if not all, they were either incarcerated, had passed away in prison, or were substance abuse users. So from the get-go, from the day I was born, the odds weren't really in my favor statistically. I didn't have a very big chance of making it to where I am now. And so I was often taking care of my mom and taking care of my family members at a really, really young age because I had to be the adult in the home. And so I think from there is where my vulnerabilities started with having to be an adult at such a young age. And then I also experienced a lot of sexual child assault from my mom's friends and people that she was involved with, and just strangers always coming in our home. And so that alone, I was already being victimized, right? And so as I grew older, and being in foster care and abusive homes and just not really having a support system, I never learned what a healthy love looked like, whether it was platonic or in a romantic relationship. I'd never known. All I had known is really what people are saying is love and then how they're treating me. So that was my version of love and attention and what that should be. And so when I was in I'd say my preteens, I really started acting out. I hit puberty a lot faster than most of my peers. I was bullied a lot for hitting puberty. What had happened is I started looking for a lot of male attention. I was getting a lot of male attention because I hit puberty a lot faster. I was developed in more ways than the other, young women that I was hanging out with. And that slowly turned into me confiding in a lot of men, older and younger, or the same age, that weren't necessarily the good people. And so they preyed on that. And that's where the manipulation and the coercion eventually started to happen. And so at 14, I had met a man, well, a boy at the time. He was 2 years older than me. And we had mutual friends. And so I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, he's a mutual friend. We're high school kids. Like, they can't, like, I was under the impression that high school kids can't hurt each other. We can't do those things the same way that adults do them to children. And so he had slowly started grooming me. He knew I was in foster care. I, confided in him a lot. And so he started grooming me. And then what had happened is I got pregnant at 16 with my first daughter. And then I got pregnant again at 18 with my second daughter. And so during that time period, the trafficker and I, we weren't speaking because I was with someone else. And I was, pregnant and taking care of kids and so on. And all during that time, like, I was homeless, I was in shelters, like, overall, it just was not a good environment to have a child or raise a child in. And so during my second pregnancy, my mom had passed away from a drug overdose. And so that really, really hit me. I didn't, despite being in foster care, I was still in foster care myself. I was under the child wardship, the Crown wardship. And so I didn't have any therapy. I didn't get grief counseling. I didn't do anything. So it was really just me sitting with the emotions of losing, a parent that I didn't grow up with, but I was close with. Like, we were chatting often after I aged out of the system and went on my own. And so after that, I became heavily involved with alcohol and substance abuse. I use that as a coping mechanism, which is something that we see a lot of survivors of abuse and trauma go through. And so my first trafficker, really, really preyed on that. And he knew that I had a substance abuse issue. And so slowly, it started into, oh, like, I'll help you make money and we can do this and you're going to get yourself out of poverty. And I was living in a shelter at the time. I didn't have any food. I couldn't afford to feed myself. I didn't have I had a high school diploma. No, every time I would enroll in college, I ended up being trafficked and then I would have to drop out of college. And so he preyed on that. And then slowly I ended up being trafficked by three different people in total. So one of them was someone who I had met on Tinder. He was a stranger. I had no idea who he was. But again, I was very, very susceptible to manipulation and coercion. And then the third person, part of it was a human trafficking ring. So they were using me to train other girls that they were trafficking that they would find. And then the other guy was also my boyfriend at the time. And so he trafficked me for quite some time after that. And it wasn't until I had the help of the police that I was able to relocate and try to get out of that situation.
Wow. I just want to go backwards a little bit. I just want to bring this one piece up because I think it's important, especially as you're sharing, more and more people are going to really understand this. But when you were in the foster care system experiencing so much just horribleness, you did tell a social worker and you were not listened to, correct? Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so early on I would say when I was about 14 or 15, I was running away a lot from my foster home. So I did confide in a social worker, and I did say that my foster home was extremely abusive. And I was running away from the home because I didn't want to be abused, but everyone else saw me as a bad kid. But really, I was being abused, and then I was running away, and I was getting into more abusive situations where people in my life were selling drugs. I was in trap houses. I got involved in, selling drugs and doing all of those things myself. And so then oftentimes what would happen is the police would just pick me up. They would say, "You're coming with us," and they'd throw me in the back of the police car and then just bring me back to the Children's Aid Society. And then later, when I was actively being trafficked and my social workers would schedule meetings with me, they would come to my house and they would knock on my windows and they would stand outside of my window and be like, "I know you're in there." but I couldn't answer because I was with my trafficker. And I had to cancel all of my meetings because I was being trafficked. And so they just saw this as me avoiding meeting with them or avoiding responsibility or just, being a bad kid and engaging in substance abuse when really, like, I didn't have the words to describe what I was going through. I just knew that something was wrong and I needed help.
Yes. So I just want to bring so much attention to this because this gives such a really good like viewpoint into well, your story, but also what does happen, I believe, with so many people because we are understanding more and more that the foster care system, like, so many children are exactly what your story has been, right? You're being set up for being trafficked and nobody's listening to you. And instead of bringing solutions, instead of bringing somebody to rescue you, you just get completely ignored. And so I just feel like this is so important for any child service worker that could be listening to this podcast in the future, any of the government politicians, your voice is so important because of everything that you're sharing. And so often I'll even, share with people that the trafficking is happening right around us. It's like I said in the beginning, it is under our noses, but people don't have a context for this because they're not seeing it before their eyes. And here you are in those moments, being really completely held captive, and you've got these other systems putting a pressure on you, and it's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. This really needs to change.
Well, I mean, like, even when I was part of when I aged out of the system, but I was still under this, it's called the CCSY program. And I was still basically under the care of Children's Aid Society. And my trafficker had on Easter weekend in 2018, or 2019, had quite literally, or no, it was 2018, had quite literally like kidnapped me in my own home and tortured me for 2 days. And when he finally left, I had escaped. And when I was running for my life to get out, I had called my worker and I was like, he's going to kill me. Like, I need help. Like, someone needs to help me. And I remember I got to the hospital and I was like black and blue. I shut down. I didn't know what to do. And I remember just laying there, and the doctor was scared to touch me. Like, everyone around me just looked at me like I was some sort of alien. And it took the police, from what I can remember, almost 6 hours to come to the hospital, to come and find me or to take a statement. And then half of that time I remember I ran and I was like screaming at the receptionist and I'm like, he's going to kill me. Like, I need help. And they just told me to wait in the waiting room. And I was like, he's going to come in this hospital and he's going to kill me. And he had called the hospital over 100 times to the point where they told him that I was discharged, so he needed to stop calling. But they don't like it's I can sit here and I can say like we need to educate and to show people that like what is happening, but it's like even when it's right in front of you, you're still not listening.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And this is what we all need to understand. Was
Mhm.
there any was there any ever moments that you can really think of? I mean, you probably just described an incredible moment of where you're wishing somebody would just step in to rescue you. But do you have any other moments where you were sensing the same thing? Like it was just all so bad. Can somebody just see what is happening right now? Is there any way for for somebody to rescue me? Did that ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I think a lot when I was a kid. Like, I knew what I was going through wasn't normal. I knew that being touched certain ways by adults wasn't normal. And I wish that there was some sort of early intervention that was adequate and was proper, because had there been, adequate intervention, I don't think I would have gone through all of the things that I have gone through. I don't think there was really, like, it was always, let's just remove her from the home and put her somewhere else. And people saw that as like a way of intervention that was positive, but really there was no support other than that. And no one had really asked what I was going through or what I needed help with. And it's hard too because I was so young. Like, I don't even know what I need help with. I just know what's happening isn't right.
Yes, exactly. You should have been protected the entire time. So, in one of your talks that I had listened to, you had described how when you were using the platform Tinder, that was one way that you were trafficked. And I just want to bring attention to this because I also have had women that have shared with me, just this is just outside of Edmonton, just outside of Calgary, that have been on that app or other ones, and they have been exploited. I think with you being so willing to share about this, this will help other women, it's everybody, of course. When women have been trafficked on a dating app, that I feel all these apps should be, safe is what you would think, but of course we know absolutely not. But can, from a legal point, the owners of these platforms or these companies, can they be held liable for the trafficking?
So I can't necessarily give legal advice because I'm not a lawyer yet, but I can say with our firm, Diamond and Diamond, a lot of the time we do raise awareness that we can go after a lot of corporations that were technically involved in trafficking. So I'll use the hotels for example. If you were trafficked through a hotel, there is the opportunity or the chance of suing the hotel for being I think it's called willful blindness of them knowing that something's going on but not really paying attention to it. Don't 100% quote me on that, but I know for the civil process, like a lot of times survivors can go after these institutions like hotels. They can go after I haven't personally seen anyone go after a dating app. I mean, that's something good for me to look into for myself, but I think the main issue is that with dating apps, for example, there aren't really any safeguards to show whether or not someone could be harmful. Obviously, you have to be very careful that you're not breaching anyone's privacy with like the questions that you're asking. There are verification methods that you have to go through, like showing your ID or etc. But it's not necessary. Like you don't have to do it. It's an optional thing to do. And these apps, they have ads sometimes, and none of those ads are related to human trafficking. It's not like, hey, trafficking happens, this is what you should look out for, or don't talk to XYZ person. Like you have people on dating apps who don't show their face. And I think naturally as a youth, and I tell this with my girls all the time, like, if someone adds you and you don't know who they are, your curiosity is your curiosity. You're going to add them back. Like, I already know I can tell you a million times not to add them back, but you're a teenager and you're curious. So you add them back. And then what happens? You add them, they catfish you, or they say they're all of these wonderful things and they're not. So, the dating apps should be doing some sort of program or something to acknowledge that like these things do happen, and these are the safeguards that we're putting in. And I think in the long run it would likely protect them from legal action, to say like, hey, we did do this and we're working our best to make sure that we're weeding out all of these things, and to go that route, because hopefully we'll see some progress with dating apps, because we can't just tell people not to use them either. Like people want to find the love of their lives, to debatable if dating apps really work, but yeah, I think overall, like there are a lot of legal options that can be taken, and it completely depends on the case itself and the circumstances and the facts.
Yes. Okay. Such incredible information that you shared. Yeah, I'm just wondering if you would expand on coercion because you lived it, you experienced so many different dynamics and levels of it. What would you say about coercion and how can you teach other people about it?
Coercion, it's hard to tell when it's happening to you. I think we're so good at pointing out when it's happening to other people, but not so much ourselves. For me, it started with just, I think, preying on a lot of my vulnerabilities, and knowing that I didn't have a good relationship with my family. I, was involved in like criminal legal activities that I shouldn't have been, substance abuse, like all of those things. And sometimes it started off as like, oh, I'm going to help you and I'll help you do better and I'll help you make money and buy all of these things that you need and buy food and so on. And I fell for it. And I started trusting them and believing that this was going to be my way to get us out of poverty and out of where we are. It obviously wasn't. And what slowly started happening was when I would say, okay, like, I don't want to do this anymore. or I don't like it. I remember after my first call that I'd ever done, I said, like, I'm not doing this. I hate it. It's gross. I feel dirty. I don't want to do it. And then I was hit with well, I paid for this and I covered the hotel and I bought you food and I bought you clothes and I did all of these things. So now you owe me. And naturally, you think, well, that makes sense. And then it's like, okay, I'll just work enough so I can pay you back the amount that you spent. But it's never like that. It's always, okay, you worked back the amount that you spent, but like, what about all this time that I've spent here with you? And, keep working and keep doing those things. And oftentimes the coercion and the manipulation, it went into threats. It was threatening my children and the people that I had cared about. And if you don't do this, like they've told me that they were going to kill me like multiple times. There was like I've had guns to my head telling me that if I don't do something, like they'll kill me. And so it like the coercion, it can start off as like stuff that's just really, really small. And like even I use having like sex with someone, for example, like if someone is persistently pressuring you into doing that and you're not okay with it, like that is coercion. That's like if you're uncomfortable and you say you don't want to do it, that should be the end of the discussion. Like there shouldn't be a continuance of, oh, well, let's do this, or oh, well, I did this for you. And people should do things for you without the expectation that you're going to give something back to them. And so coercion can show up in many different ways. And I think oftentimes vulnerable people are more susceptible to the effects of coercion.
Yes, absolutely. What would be your advice right now to somebody that is currently dealing with coercion and how, even with vulnerabilities, how could they begin to strengthen themselves?
I think a lot of it is to, have a really, really good support system and try to find people that you trust, whether it's like a friend or a family member, and to slowly just acknowledge. I think like the media is a really good place to learn a lot about like what coercion is and what manipulation is. It's really, really hard to give advice to someone who's going through it because oftentimes when we're going through it, we don't care, right? Like we don't care. We love our abusers. A lot of us are trauma bonded to them. So it doesn't really matter what an outside source says. I think the biggest thing, and this goes more for like caregivers and people who are involved with vulnerable people, is to always be there and to always be that support person and not give up on someone who's going through this because eventually, like me, they will have a break and they will come to the realization that what is going on is not okay and it's not and they deserve better. And I think when that happens, to be able to have that support system to fall back on and to show you that you can get out and it's going to be safe and it's going to be okay. I think that like that's what most people, social workers and caregivers should focus on.
Yeah. So how did you end up getting your break and getting out?
I was a part of a group, like it was a group sexual assault therapy. It was like a group therapy, and it was filled with all young women, and we would just meet together. I think it was weekly or bi-weekly, and I started talking about a lot of the things that I was going through, and everything was confidential. So I started feeling safe, and I just started talking about everything that I was going through, and they started telling me that like it wasn't normal. Like I shouldn't be going through that. And what happened wasn't okay. And I still speak to some of those women now and they're like, Sandra, like you were defending him, like you did something wrong. And so now looking back, I can say that like the women and the group, they helped me get out because they showed me that what was happening wasn't okay. And that nonprofit that I was involved with at the time, they connected me with the police and with some Toronto supports. Kelly Beal, who's a lawyer for human trafficking victims, they connected me with her, and then the police had relocated me to Toronto. I stayed in a shelter here for quite some time, and then I worked with like the human trafficking detectives and everything. And ultimately, like that's when I was able to get out and to finally rebuild my life with the support of the police and Kelly and the nonprofits that I was involved with. Because had I not, been uplifted by all of those women and then the groups that I was a part of, and then Kelly, I don't think like I would have ever made it out of what I was going through.
Wow. Yes, because I was understanding again through just researching that most people don't make it out.
Hmm.
So It's just incredible to be here talking with you. I'm so amazed at your story and just everything. Absolutely incredible.
Oh, thank you.
When you were in the thick of it, of the trafficked portion, how did people on the outside treat you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think anyone really knew. I don't think no anyone knew what I was going because I had a job. So I had a job. No one really knew what I was going through. I was going to work, but what people didn't see is that even though I was working a job, my trafficker was taking my money. So even when I worked a normal job, like a 9 to 5, he was taking my money, and then he would traffic me on the times that I was off. But it was interesting because I think like I realized that I wanted more for myself when I was in a hotel parking lot. I was at the Delta in Ottawa, and we were sitting in the hotel parking lot at like 5 a.m. It was like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. And we were waiting to check into the hotel because they had trafficked me like completely the night before. And so when we were sitting there, I was watching everyone go to work. And I was just sitting there and I was like watching everyone live their normal lives, working their 9 to 5 and like go to work. And I was like, this, like, that's the life that I'm supposed to be living. Like, that's where I should be. And then I think like after that, I totally blanked on what your original question was.
No, with what you just described, it gives us such a good, clear picture, a lens focus in on really how you were trapped, and there again, so many more people, are trapped even today as we're speaking, right? And so you're watching people go, in and out of their 9 to 5 job kind of thing, right? And you're going, oh, well, that's actually where I should be. I really shouldn't be here.
What did people
How were
think
you
of me?
treated from the outside, from the outside world? How were you treated? Were you ever treated poorly? Or maybe
Uh,
you don't really recognize that.
no, I think like in my teens, I definitely was. Like I was the high school girl who got pregnant and was like a teenage pregnant dropout, right? So all of my peers had kind of like, you know, made fun of me and said like I'm never going to go anywhere in life and all of these horrible things. And I think a lot of people said I was a sex worker. They said I was a prostitute. They just said that like I was a scammer and I was a drug dealer and like I was all of these horrible things, but no one really knew what was happening. And I don't blame people necessarily for how they treated me. It was obviously wrong, but I think like overall no one really knew what I was going through and what I had to do to survive. But like for me personally, like I that wasn't a choice. Like I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so when people would label me as that, it would hurt. And those labels stuck with me for so long. And it wasn't until I finally came out about my story where people started messaging me and were like, oh, wow, like I'm so sorry that you had gone through that. And it's like, well, you can't judge people based on what they're going through because a lot of the people who are going through the worst moments of their life are the people who have the most potential to do good and to, become amazing, amazing people. So I think like earlier in my adulthood, no one really knew what I was going through. I think people just saw me as like a sex worker and someone who just, was making tons of money and all of these things. And in my teens, again, like I was just bullied, all of the horrible slurs that teenagers called each other and whatnot. I think I was called probably every name in the book. But now, like, obviously, it's much different that I'm open about my story.
Yes. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about so you have an article about like the TD Bank and the financial coercion. And would you mind just sharing a little bit about that? This is just absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, so over the years that I was trafficked, all of my traffickers had incurred debt under my name that wasn't necessarily mine. And so what that looked like was, a lot of the traffickers were involved in fraud, in credit card scams, and all of these things. And so what started to happen was they would take out phones in my name, they would take out car loans in my name, debts, payday loans, like literally any way that they could get money, they would start using my ID and my information. And what had happened was a lot of the time, like they would make me go into these banks and take out money and to take out money from other people's cards and to take out money from my own card and give it to them. And so that's like coerced debt. And that's what Bill 41 is the provincial legislation to hold creditors more accountable in whether or not they actually pursue this debt. So typically what that means is you'll have an organization that will reach out to the creditors and say, hey, this person is a victim of coerced debt. We are, affirming his or her story, and we're supporting that this did happen. And there could be a police investigation, or the survivor's chosen not to report to the police. And so then the legislation allows creditors to clear that debt. And so what happened with me is some of my debt was cleared. And then if I was having to pay back any money that I had already paid, they issued that money back to me because it was part of a coerced debt. And so one of the really big gaps that we're seeing now, which I'm currently in the process working with tax counsel to try and get some, help and support and awareness around this, is we have the provincial legislation, and the provincial legislation and provincial, stakeholders have done an amazing job at being able to clear that debt and to get those fast acting solutions for survivors. But what we're seeing now is the federal government is lagging so much in supporting survivors of human trafficking with respect to coerced debt. For example, I submitted my file to the CRA for overpay for debts that my traffickers had incurred in my name, but they took the money. And so I submitted my file almost 2 years ago. The CRA is still deducting my tax return to pay back this amount owing, despite me not being, it not being from me.
Yeah.
And so, I'm working with tax counsel to try and get some sort of legislation or help to get all of that money back. I went from owing $30,000 to now only owing $2,000. And that's not because the debt has been forgiven. It's because the CRA has clawed back any amount that they can whenever they can from my benefits. And so that's what the coerced debt does. And another huge gap is I'm 28 years old. And so, despite having my debt cleared, my credit is as if I just started credit at 18 years old. So, we need to find some sort of solution where if it is coerced debt, maybe we'll leave all of the good payments. Even though it was coerced debt, if it was paid on time, let's leave the good payment there so it can increase that credit score. Or let's put their credit score at the average that it should be for someone their age of, like the general population. But, we haven't seen any progress on that part, which is, it's not great. But the financial aspect is a really big one because oftentimes that comes before the trafficking is, getting someone through coercion and manipulation to give over their finances, give traffickers access to their bank account, to their SIN number, to their driver's license, like all of these things. And particularly with vulnerable youth who don't know how important these things are. A lot of people, a lot of us don't have financial management. Like we have no idea what we're doing, what portion goes to rent, what goes to groceries, and so on. So the coerced debt, I mean, I could go on forever. It's a really, really big issue, and I think it needs a lot more attention from the federal government. So I'm hoping, this year we'll see some sort of move and progress with federal legislation for coerced debt.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I just want to point out for our listeners that so you had been mentioning that there was this debt incurred by the traffickers, and yet the CRA absolutely was refusing to work with the file. Like this is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So that really needs to change in this nation.
Yeah, I think like the issue is they don't know, like no one knows what's going on, which is like the first problem is you
Yes.
have the Canada Revenue Agency, which governs all of our tax purposes, all of our benefits, like all of that. They have no idea what's going on. And so when you throw in a huge other issue with human trafficking and coerced debt without having and no disrespect to people who work at the CRA, your degrees and everything are so valid, but you're working with people who have no idea how trafficking happens, how coerced debt happens, manipulation, coercion, like you've no idea. So to have a board of people, of employees who did a degree in accounting, determine whether or not a debt is valid or invalid for a survivor is is astonishing. It's sad, it's horrible, and people like me are suffering. I'm a single parent. I'm working as many jobs as I possibly can. I'm taking care of two kids. They have needs, sports, dental issues. Like there's so many things that I have to pay for, but my benefits are being clawed and my tax returns are being taken over a debt that I had no control over. So I'm hopeful that with, the support of my tax counsel, who, have taken on my case, that we're able to try and make some headway and to make some precedent so that this doesn't happen to, future survivors who go through this process.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think, some people might think, like some people in the positions that you just mentioned might not even have a desire to learn about coercion and manipulation. But the reality is, with the rate at which human trafficking, the crime of it in Canada is growing, I think every sector needs to become completely made trauma informed human trafficking awareness and all the signs and symptoms of what that looks like because
Mhm.
they have the ability to make people's lives easier.
Yeah, exactly.
What could you say in this moment as we get closer to closing to somebody that, again, listening to this, that is being, is they would say maybe they're trapped in the foster care system or trapped in trafficking, just in this moment, what encouragement could you bring to them from everything that you've been through and the position you're in now to really be advocating? What encouragement can you give somebody?
I would say, it's hard because I'm like, what would have worked on me? I think like just know that it does get better. Everybody says like it, and I said this to so many people. I was like, everyone tells me it's gonna get better, but it never gets better, and I'm always in the same position. But like looking back now, I can confidently say it does get better. And I'm always here. I have so many survivors who reach out to me on Instagram or by email and just shoot me emails about what they're going through, and I always talk to them about it. Because even just having someone listen, sometimes advice isn't what people want to hear, and they just want someone to listen, someone that they can vent to. So I can say like I'm always here, and it does get better. And I think looking back, I genuinely believed that like that was going to be my life, and I didn't think I was gonna live like past the age of 16, to be quite honest. Like when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, well, this is it for me. Like this is my life. I'm gonna, be like my biological family and not make it out anywhere and just, live on the street. But I can say like it gets better and to have faith and reach out. There's so many free therapy groups and community programs. And had I not gone to that one therapy group, I feel like my life could be so much different. Like there are phenomenal, phenomenal people out there who are going through something similar, and you really just need to find your group of people. And I'm always here. Anyone can, message me or anything, and I'd always be a listening ear. So yeah.
That is such good advice. My next question is, what advice can you share right now with a teacher that would be watching this, with local politicians watching this, moms, dads, churches, community organizations? What would you say to them right now out of advice?
Stop thinking that it can't happen to you or someone that you care about because just because you come from a very good, privileged family. There's a lot of privileged people who grow up in great families who are also trafficked. There are people who are traffickers. Politicians can be traffickers.
Yeah.
Teachers can be traffickers. Like anybody
Judges.
and everybody can be a trafficker. And, seeing the people that I saw when I was being trafficked, it's possible. It's 100% possible. And I think like stop thinking that it can't happen to you. And when you're advocating for people, listen to them. Don't just say you're listening, like actually listen and incorporate survivor perspectives into what you're advocating for. And with respect to like high school teachers and social workers, like there's no such thing as a bad kid. There's no such thing as a bad teenager. Like everyone is going through something. And I think all kids need and youth need are someone to believe in them and someone to tell them that they're not a bad kid and they can go places and to provide that guidance. But overall, I think like adults just need to be more compassionate towards our youth and our kids because like they have every single emotion that we have, except they're in like a body that's like, 10 times smaller than ours. So, all of that emotion with nowhere to go, I think it's important for adults to, be kind and to support vulnerable and people and youth.
Yes. So your website is absolutely incredible. It's loaded with articles and also the videos that you've made and the other places that you've spoken at. So I just want to encourage all of our listeners to go to Cassandra's website. Can you just mention that and any of your social medias?
Yeah, so my Instagram is the Cassandra H, and then you can find me on my website, which is cassandraharvey.org. I'm also on LinkedIn. It's just Cassandra Harvey. And then I have a TikTok, which is legally.cas is my TikTok.
Okay. Yeah, that's really incredible. And if anybody wanted to donate to you financially just to support you, how can they do that?
Everything can be done through my website. So a lot of the donations that I receive allow me to go do public speaking engagements with vulnerable groups and to do all of those sorts of things. And then also it just helps me spread awareness and get the message out there about human trafficking and my own story and to be able to support other people.
Yes, absolutely. So I just want to encourage everybody listening, please support Cassandra and find that page where you can give to her financially. Is there anything else you wanted to add that we didn't talk about?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me. It was such an honor and a privilege, and it was really, really nice meeting you. And I really hope that this episode resonates with people. And again, I'm so thankful for you and having me on your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Cassandra. It's been absolutely just incredible to have you on. I'm wondering, can we pray together for
Yeah,
the people?
let's do it.
Okay, so God, I just thank you so much for Cassandra. I thank you for her voice and for her courage and for her bravery and for the way that she stands. I pray that you'll just continue to strengthen her. And I pray that women and girls and boys, of course, too, when they hear her story, Lord, that they will look at her as a symbol of hope and of purpose and destination and that you will bring everybody that is currently under captivity in human trafficking and coercion and manipulation, that you will bring them out into complete freedom and that they will experience justice and lives that are full of freedom and enjoyment the way that it should be. And we pray that Canada will be a place where women and girls can actually be safe, that this is a place that can actually stand up for women and girls, and that this will no longer be a place where so much trafficking can happen. So we just pray, Father, that this all changes in Jesus' name. And we just bless Cassandra and we just thank you for her and all the work that you're doing. And we just bless her in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Jessa. It was a privilege to meet you.
Thank you again, Cassandra, for being here. It was really an honor and a privilege to be able to sit and take this time with you. So thank you again.